So we're going to begin a series of videos showing how to use the HTML5 canvas. Mostly the canvas works pretty well. There's a few little gotchas though, which frankly I find kind of annoying. You'll see as we get into it, but you can do quite a bit with it. So the first thing we have to do is create a canvas element in our HTML5 page, and that's actually where you set the width and the height. So here I have a canvas that has an ID of panel, and it has a width and a height of 800 pixels. Otherwise, this is a normal HTML5 page. I've included a CSS file and a script file that we'll look at in a second. Let's go ahead and look first at the CSS, because we won't need this again. So you can see that I've grabbed the panel element here with a ID selector, and I've just put a border around the panel, and I gave it a 1 EM margin at the top and bottom, and then I tried to center it with auto, which frankly doesn't seem to be working. And then I set the background color of the panel to aqua, which is actually working. Alright, if we go over here to the script, I've actually done quite a few bits of code here, although it's fairly simple. I remembered for the first time to use the use strict, and it actually bit me in the ass, because it turns out that in the next program where I have some function definitions, if you put the functions inside this window on load function, they have to be the first thing if you use the use strict. So I've discovered that in the other program that I'll show you here directly. The other thing that happened today is I forgot to use a var in one of my for loops, and I couldn't get it to run until I used the debugger in the browser, and it said that strict wouldn't allow that. So that's one thing that I knew about strict. It won't let you use undeclared variables. So for instance, in normal JavaScript, that would be fine. Under use strict though, it wouldn't. That's a good thing, because if you just misspell a variable and you're not using strict, it's valid, and that's a very difficult bug to find. Okay, so let's look at how this works. We grab our canvas immediately with the document get element by ID. Again, panel is the name of my canvas. I'm not using any jQuery here. This is all straight JavaScript. And so now I have the handle the canvas, and then the canvas I'm going to get a graphics context, and this is going to be 2D. And because this stuff is real similar to the way we do 2D graphics in Java, I've adopted the Java convention of using G2 as the name of the 2D graphic context. We probably won't get this far in the course, but it turns out you can actually do a three-dimensional structure here with the canvas as well, using WebGL and stuff like that. I don't know much about that so far. Okay. Now let me skip down here, and I basically have a for loop that's going to draw a bunch of lines, but I don't want to go through that yet. I want to show you just the basics. So the way this works is you begin a path on your graphics context. Everything is going to be through the graphics context. And then we have a move to, which sets the start point for whatever we're going to draw. In this case, we're going to draw lines. And you can see that I'm using the math.random. And notice this canvas.width and canvas.height. So that's going to return a random value from basically 0 to 799 because I set the height and the width of the canvas in the HTML to 800 here. Okay, and then basically I'm setting my line width, and I'm randomizing that, and that's going to be from 1 to 10 basically. And I didn't want to have it 0, obviously, then the line wouldn't show. It turns out that 1 is pretty small. If you get up to around 10, then you can actually see the ends of the lines, and I'll show you about the line cap and that in a second. Okay, I wanted to do random color, and it turns out that took quite a bit of work. We'll skip that for now, okay? But you can kind of see what's going on here. I'm creating the random red, green, and blue factor, which is going to be a byte. And then I'm calling a custom function here to set the stroke style. So an alternative to this would be to hard code this in to a style that you wanted. And this is why this is such a pain in the ass, because this is a string. And so if you want to interpolate variables in here, it makes it real difficult to do. You can also do something like this. G2 dot stroke style equals blue. I can use single or double quotes here. So again, you can use the name colors. The thing that I wanted to do here was set up a random color. That turned out to be a real pain in the ass to do, but once I figured it out, it's easy. You can do it every time. Okay, so don't worry so much about that. Again, and don't worry right now about begin path. So basically what begin path does is it separates the subcommands into groups, and the style then applies on the group. And so when you want a different style, you have to do that. So without the begin path, this program will basically draw everything in one color, because the color command will only get applied that one time, which is kind of weird, right? But anyhow, I had to put the begin path in to have the random color separate out and show. Okay, line cap is the way that the ends of the lines are drawn. This will draw a rounded end. There's also butt and B-U-T-T. And I think the other one is miter. I might be wrong about that. But it controls how the end is factored in, rendered. Okay. Move to moves to a random point. And by the way, we don't really need to have two of these in here, so let's go ahead and delete this one. By the time I'd figured out how to do all the crap with color, I missed that I'd already had that in there. Okay. So again, we set the line width. Don't worry about it. I'll go into it in a second. But we set the random color. Then we set the line cap. We move to the first point, and then we use the line to command to draw from that point. So move to doesn't draw. It sets the position of the first line. It's kind of weird the way the library is set up, but it's designed to chain one drawing command to another. So basically this moves me to the start point, and then this draws from that point to the next one that I specify. So you can basically see that here I'm moving to a random point, and then here I'm drawing to a random point from the one that I was already on. Okay, now that actually creates the line, but it doesn't render it. So to render the line, you have to use the stroke command, and that will actually then draw the line and show it on the canvas. Okay, now to get back here, essentially because I got the begin path, the path ends when you draw. And so I want this color to work. If I don't put the color in, the begin path in here, it'll basically draw it all in one color. Okay, real quickly, these are just some helper functions. I got these from Stack Overflow. Oh, you know what? I'm going to have to move them. That's weird. I wonder why. Let's see if this works. I thought I had to move the functions up at the top because of the use strict. Maybe I read that wrong. Okay, so basically what happens here is you pass a value for the RGB in, and it's going to be a random number again, or a specific value specified, and then it calls this convert function right here. And what that does is this toString16 is a JavaScript thing that generates a hexadecimal number given a decimal input. And then because that can have either 1 or 2 digits, we check its length. If it's equal to 1, we prepend a 0 to it. Otherwise, it's got 2 digits. So basically, this is going to return a 2-digit number in each case, and then here in the toRGB function, it's going to return an RGB hex triple. So this will basically be #, 2 digits, 2 digits, 2 digits in hex, so it'll always be 6 digits, and that'll actually end up working. And then up in here you can see where I call the toRGB support function using the RGB values that I generated here. So that's how you do the random color. Let's see if this works. I'm kind of surprised there that it's working with the functions at the bottom. But I'm pretty certain that I already ran this and didn't move them. So here we go, and you can see these random segments here are all drawn. They're different widths. So I'm kind of surprised about the function. I guess I got that wrong and misunderstood. But I had an error message before that said the functions had to be the first thing when they were defined internally like that. So I moved them up and it worked. Okay, so real quick recap here. You get the graphics context from the canvas, and for right now we want a 2D context. There is a 3D as well for WebGL graphics. And then if you want to just draw a single line, you move to the first point and then do line 2. That creates the line, and then stroke will draw the line. And when you draw the line, you're using the stroke style. So here it's just color. I think later on we'll see that you can do a bit more with that. And then we already saw here that you have the line caps. So again, you can make the ends of the lines round. Let's go back and look at that again in the browser here. Oops, looks like I closed it out. Okay, so let me launch that again. We can look at the lines and take a look here. See, there you can see the round style of the line. And I forget what the other two. I know one of them is butt, and I think the other might be miter. That's very similar, by the way, to the way 2D graphics are done in Java here. Okay. All right. And then when you have style, and you're going to do a bunch of drawing, you have to be careful about these begin paths. So basically, if I use begin path, the style that I apply will apply to that path until I do a stroke. Now there's also a command I'll show you in a moment called close path. And what close path will do is it'll draw an extra line from the last point you left at to the very first point when you began, and that gives you a closed figure. Okay? So hopefully that makes some sense to you here. Let's go ahead and look at our second example. So let me close all of this and then open, and now we're going to look at random paths. So technically a path is like a closed loop of segments, and of course a line is just a single segment. An open path, by the way, is a series of segments that don't join. So we're talking about a closed path when I said path here, actually. Okay. Alright, so this is a kind of variation of the previous program, but it's going to draw paths. Again, I moved these functions up here because I was getting an error that said you had to, but apparently that's not true because in the last program I had them at the bottom, so I don't know what's going on there. Again, it's very similar. These are exactly the same as the last time, so I'm not going to go over them again. We grab the canvas, we get the context from it. I've set the total lines down so you can see that they're actually paths. Before I had this up to 100, and then the num segments is going to be randomized. So it's going to create a path of a number of random segments. And then here are my variables again for these values. I didn't play with the A yet. The A is the alpha channel. So you can make these so that they have different transparency. I'm not sure the lines will make much sense with that, but that'll make a difference when we start doing filled shapes. Okay, again, we're going to draw 10 of these closed paths. We start with a begin path, randomize the line width, randomize the number of line segments, and notice that I want to have at least 2, right? It doesn't make sense to tell it to draw a closed path with less than 2 segments. You can't do that, and I imagine that would generate an error. It might not, though. So this is basically going to be 2 to 7 sided figures. Just for shits and grins, let's go ahead and raise that up a bit. Okay, so we'll get different kinds. Again, there's my random colors, my random color function. Now this doesn't really make sense because these lines are going to be joined, but we'll go ahead and change this to but I don't expect that we'll be able to see any difference there because now the lines are joined. There's actually another way in the library to control how the lines intersect one another. I haven't gotten that far yet. We move to a random point. That's the start point. That'll also be the end point. Here's a loop that now draws all the segments. So we just have a draw to command that's going to execute for each one of the segments. Again, we just change that, so that'll be at least 2 up to 11, right? Okay. And then this is the important part here. We close the path and then we draw it. So it's very important that you actually close the path first before you draw it. Otherwise, it doesn't add the last segment. Now, when you do close path, what it does is it draws from the last point of the segments, the very last segment generated in here, to the very first point that you started with here. Okay? Alright, let's take a look at this. Let me save it because I did change the code slightly. And hopefully this will work right out of the box. There we go. Okay? And it's kind of difficult to see. Here, let's look at this one here. So you can see that these, and there's a way to change that point there where the line points intersect. I'll try and look that up and give that to you here directly. Okay, I think that's enough for our first video. We basically covered how to create lines and how to create segmented paths. And you're going to see as we add the other drawing primitives in that you can chain them all together to draw intricate shapes that are joined from one to the next. And that's kind of the way the library is set up.